In the gap between typewriters and computers, there briefly existed a market for devices like one of these. This is a Tandy WP-2, a portable word processor. Not quite a computer, but definitely not a typewriter. Devices like this have all virtually disappeared, with only the occasional digital typewriter project reinventing them. But the original devices, like this one, were actually quite good, and when you don't have unreal expectations for them, they can still be nice to use. Today we're going to take a look at how you would still use a 1989 word processor and talk about if it holds up well today. And I'll give you a hint about that, this video's script was entirely written on this very device. Well, at least the first draft. But before we roll the intro, this video is part of SepTandy. Myself and many other creators will be releasing videos featuring Tandy Radio Shack devices. If you want to check them out, everyone participating is linked in the description. Right now, it's shaping up to be more Sept Coco, as Mr. Lurch's Things, Adrian's Digital Basement, and the Retro Channel have taken some looks at them, and I think LGR will be as well. But Yan Beta has broken the mold and got himself a Model 1 to get working, and I'll be joining him as we start to take a look at the WP-2. The WP-2 was introduced in 1989 and first appeared in the Radio Shack catalog the next year for a price of $349. For a device that can't do much more than store text out of the box, that feels like a hefty price tag, but portable computers were nowhere near that price yet. A Tandy PC-compatible laptop cost $1,500 or $2,500 depending on the configuration, but that's in another league. If we go back a few pages from the WP-2, we can see the closest other Radio Shack product at the time, the Tandy Model 102 for $599. But while that was a fully fledged computer that ran BASIC, the WP-2 actually has a better screen, the same amount of stock memory, and even uses a nearly identical keyboard. It can also use most of the Model 100's peripherals, which we'll come back to later. So the WP-2 wasn't a bad deal if you didn't need it for programming. Now, the example I have here was sent to me by David some time ago, and I've really been meaning to get around to fixing it to try it out. It does have a problem, but we'll need to open it up before you can see what that is. The battery contacts inside have broken free and lost some of the plastic that retains them. I decided that the best solution to fix this would be to bring back the superglue and baking soda repair method I covered a while ago. Removing the keyboard to get more space makes this a fairly easy solution, and I was able to get a good amount of material built up to hold them in place. While I had the keyboard out, I figured I may as well pull it apart and give it a good cleaning as well. I've cleaned way too many keyboards, and this has just become a routine for me now. And I also figured I'd give the whole thing a wipe down while I was at it. After soaking the keys, laying them out to dry, and a little wipe down, they're ready to be put back. I guess this is technically a rubber dome keyboard. You don't usually have to put the domes on one at a time like this. After finishing up the keyboard, I went back and checked the battery contact repairs, and they were very solid. A completely successful repair there. With that done, we can stop and appreciate some of what's going on now, and I discovered this WP-2 has had its RAM maxed out with a 128K chip. There's not much else to see though. Even the EEPROM that holds what little operating system this has is an SMD part. I went ahead and began the reassembly process and took care of one more minor issue where one of the screw posts had broken free. A dab of superglue and a pinch of baking soda with a little pressure and time worked well to fix that. Then there was something else I wanted to take a look at. Like many portable devices from this era, the WP-2 has a secondary battery to keep the memory live when the main batteries fail. This device uses a CR2430 for this, a slightly odd battery type. However, it's the same voltage as the more common CR2032, which I would much rather use. So I decided to massage the top contact strip to grab more tightly, and patted the battery door to hold it a little tighter so it wouldn't move, and it worked out perfectly. The device will technically work without the backup battery, but it will constantly blink the display, making it practically unusable. Now that my unit is fresh and ready to go, we can start to take a look at some of its features. And the first feature I should mention is that it says Tandy on it, though it technically isn't. The firmware copyright and main PCB both show its origin from a Japanese company called Citizen. You may know them more as a watch manufacturer, but they dabble in consumer electronics as well. The CBM 10WP this is based on is nearly identical, aside from the gray case. Oh yeah, Citizen also went by CBM, which isn't confusing at all for vintage computer enthusiasts. Anyway, the Citizen version of this device seems incredibly uncommon. Even on Yahoo Auctions for Japan, there aren't any for sale, and that webpage I showed you earlier is the only example of a picture of one of them I could find. It seems like the Tandy model likely outsold the original, and I would be curious if that Citizen version supports external disk drives, which the WP2 does, using the Tandy portable disk drive. The compatibility is hard to guess though, because the origins start to get a little messy. The Tandy portable disk drive is actually designed by Brother and sold for the Model 100, which is based on a Kyocera, so who knows what the compatibility is with that. Now let's talk about the experience of using it. As I said at the start of this video, I completely wrote, or at the time you're seeing this now, am writing the script on here because I wanted the complete experience. And now that I've been using it for a while, I can easily say that it's a very competent device. The keyboard isn't much to write home about, but it's perfectly capable and much better than some of the other devices I've used, like the Brother EP20 from around the same time. The display is very sharp and clear, and the adjustable contrast makes it easy enough to get a good view at almost any reasonable angle. Navigation in the text is quick and easy with the cursor keys that can move by character, scroll the entire display, jump to line ends, and skip words. Though as an HJKL user, which would have been contemporary, I am annoyed that the vertical arrow keys are reversed. Now, if you move back in the text and try to add more in the middle of a paragraph, you'll find it really slows down when shifting the existing text. Even an average speed typist like myself can outpace this device when it needs to move the text around. Temporarily adding a line break where you want to add text can fix that problem though. Above the keyboard are the labels for the many different features and functions you can use on the WP2. These are split between two rows that are accessed by holding one of two function keys and pressing the key under the label. First, while editing text, you have a number of common and handy features. Searching, selecting, copying, cutting, and pasting text are all possible and work well enough with the text-based interface. Though there isn't an undo if you make a mistake. And it should be noted that copied text is stored as a temporary document in main memory, so you'll need to have space for it. Now, this completely text-based UI is something to keep in mind. This display cannot show any pixel graphics, so even something like showing page margins on the status screen are just done with text characters. In addition to the basic text editing features, it also has some more advanced word processing features. It has a built-in dictionary for spell checking with an option to add more custom words to it. And the spell checking can either be done on a single word or searching the entire document. It can also be used as a thesaurus and recommend synonymous words. I find both of these features to be really impressive on here, but they have their limits. For example, the spell checker didn't recognize the word fledged when I typed it earlier on in the script. Now, let's take a look at some other modes WP2 has. Files is how you manage multiple documents and storage devices on it. Using it, you can copy files between the stock memory, the expanded RAM, an external card, a Model 100 disk drive, and cassette. This area also shows one of the more annoying problems on this device. In order to do a copy, you must use one of the many hidden shortcuts that aren't labeled on the device itself. Unfortunately, it also seems like no one has scanned the original manual online, and I haven't found a good place for a list of all of these. An amount of trial and error along with some reading online has led me to find a few of them though. F1 plus D can delete a file, F1 plus C can copy a file to another storage location, and F1 plus N can create a new document. I'm sure there are more, and there's at least one more I'll come back to, but I wish there were more labels on the keys for these shortcuts. There are 4 other big functions the WP2 has: Run, Phone, Telecom, and Calendar. Phone is just a phone book, and both it and Calendar are a waste of space on this device. I'm not even going to dignify them with sample B-roll. Every portable device in this era was adding those features. You can even do the same thing on a Casio Databank watch. Plus, they add more documents to the main memory, and that space comes at a premium, limiting some functions. So I don't see anyone wanting to waste space on here for those. Run is, well, weird. Let's get back to that in a moment, because we need to take a look at the device a little more closely, and then we can get to Telcom first, which rocks. I haven't really mentioned it, but on the back of the WP2, we have 4 connectors. External 6-volt negative center power, the cassette port for storing documents on tape with a standard cassette recorder, a printer port that we will definitely be trying out, and lastly, an RS-232 serial port. Just about everything you could wish this could do with the serial port, it can, and this is how you store files on the Model 100's disk drives. Now, I don't have one of those, but we can emulate one with a cool Linux program that was actually last updated 3 days ago as I'm writing this. Wow. Since this is just a serial port, you can use a null modem USB serial adapter connected directly to your computer over USB. Then, once the program is compiled, you run it with a source directory for the virtual drive, and you can copy files to and from the computer. For example, I can copy over this month's Patreon hard copy supporter printout and try printing it from here in a bit. Using this, we can also easily copy something over and try out Run now. For some reason, this device has the ability to run binaries written for its Z80 processor. The only example of this being used, though, that I can find to try is a homebrew port of CamelForth, a fourth programming language interpreter, which is now actually about as old itself as the WP2 was when it was made in 2005. Time is weird. Putting Forth on here, though, does make an honest computer out of it now, since it can at the minimum be used as a rudimentary RPN calculator. The drive emulator software is really cool, but definitely not the authentic way to use it. But it has another trick up its sleeve, because Telcom on the WP2 can send and receive documents directly over the serial port as raw text. This would have been better in its time because it could be used with nearly any system available when the device was in use, like my 46 DOS computer, which is very close to when this would have been used. Before you send a document, you'll want to go into Files and run another hidden command, F1+A, on it. This will let you convert the WP2's custom DO file type into a DA file, which is essentially the same thing as a plain text file. This does have the side effect of clearing all of the layout metadata for the document, but this makes it much more usable on a computer. Once the document you want to send has been converted, it's time for even more hidden shortcuts, in Telcom this time. Which, before using, you'll need to go into your serial settings under System first. I'm using the ubiquitous 9600 baud 8N1 setting for it. When you are connected to the computer, you'll want to press F1+U to upload the file from Telcom. On the computer side, you'll need to have a program that can receive the file. I'm using Procom Plus here. Then, once you have the file on your computer, you can make any change you want to it with your editor of choice. If you want to take the file with you again on the WP2, you can download it by pressing F1D in Telcom mode and sending it back from the computer. It doesn't know when the transfer is over though, so you'll have to end the transfer with the last hidden shortcut I found, F1+S, to save it. To me, this is what really makes the WP2 interesting, because you can do the same process of uploading documents on modern computers still with serial or the disk drive emulator. This means you could take your WP2 somewhere out for a break or distraction-free workplace and then come back and sync it up with your computer and put the files in your preferred office software, like Google Docs. This will get you the best of both worlds, because as much as it's nice to write on the WP2, the 8-line text interface is pretty rough for editing, and even I ended up doing that on a computer for this script. The next thing is the same thing. Telcom still rocks, and we haven't fully exhausted it yet. The file transfer function is just part of what it can do, because it's actually a full terminal client. If you had it connected to a modem or acoustic coupler, it could even dial out to a remote system. This would let a field reporter send a story over a payphone to an editor or publisher from anywhere in the world. That's pretty cool. But it can also use interactive services like a BBS, or if you're like me, you'll see this and think Linux. And it is technically possible, but even though you can just run Getty on a serial port, and there is a community-created custom term cap entry available, it's really difficult to use. The console interface doesn't work very well, and unlike with the TRS-80 DT1 I covered last year, Screen really doesn't help to fix this. The 8-line display is just extremely limiting, and anything that uses curses seems to shift everything over, and line wrapping breaks completely. It gets worse though, because even though the baud rate is set to 9600, it seems way slower than that, and I'm not sure why. I've tried it on multiple systems, and it's always the same. It's just slow enough that it's not really usable. So while yes, technically it can work, I wouldn't want to use it. Alright, let's try one last thing before we wrap this up. Printing. I still need to print out the hard copy supporter list for this month, and there's no reason I can't do it from here. Now, I have this file pre-formatted with whitespace, so I need to make sure that the layout is correct when I print it. You can do that in the Layout menu to control margins, line and page length, and headers and footers. I need to disable the margins and set the line length to 80 for my file. Then I can start the print. This is a handy feature, especially if you don't have access to a computer, but preparing a document on a computer would give you a lot better options, so that would be the preferred way to do it if you could. Well, that's pretty much it for the WP2. There are a couple more little quirks to using it, but they aren't that much to worry about. Overall, I really like it, and I have enjoyed using it to write this script, but that begs the ultimate question: will I do it again? I don't have any one objection to the idea of that, but there are a lot of little things that will probably keep me from doing it again. I wrote the whole script on battery to get the full portable effect, but I don't like the idea of going back to needing to feed something more AA's all the time. And then there is the memory problem that makes modding it with a rechargeable battery not all that appealing. If both sets of batteries fail or just lose contact for some reason, you'll lose all of your work because the data is only stored in volatile RAM. The only way to work around this is to get a hold of one of the rare storage expansion cards that aren't tied to the main battery. Since that's not likely to happen, using this will always have a sense of risk involved. And lastly, the display. For a reflective screen, it's really not that bad, but you do have to have the lighting at the right angle for the fixed position screen to be clear, and the angle the light is at and proper ergonomics rarely mix. I found that typing on it with it on my lap, staring straight down, was the easiest way to use it, but that's not very comfortable for long stretches, and I found myself needing to take more frequent breaks. It is meant to be portable, so this is mostly forgivable, but a flip-up screen would have fixed a lot of this. Part of the strain is my fault though. I would say this video script is probably on the long side for this device. It's also a lot for it to store. At the point when I was writing this script, I was using 15,104 characters and had 6,033 left on it, with only one other blank document in the memory. Now I could move the script to the RAM upgrade chip that's in it, and that would give me plenty of space, but without that, I could easily see a longer document like this completely filling the memory. But back when this was new, there weren't many better options in its price range, and under the right workflow, this would have made a lot of sense. Now, it's mostly just down to a couple of drawbacks we don't have to deal with on modern devices. I'll probably stick with writing on my computers, but the WP-2 is still an attractive concept despite its quirks. If you enjoyed this video, you should check out the other creators making videos for SepTandy. Again, you'll find them all linked in the description. But that's everything I have to say on the WP-2. I'll have more videos like this in the future, so you may want to subscribe, and if you want to support the channel, I am on Patreon. But for now, that's it, and I'll see you next time.